is the question of anti-conversion laws
Right.
in the state of UP and other states who have expressed to
Right.
enact a similar kind of laws.
Right.
And the critics say that this is a violation of the religious freedom. This is the violation of the individual liberty. That's their point.
Right.
And this is basically destruction of the secular India, that you are imposing Nuremberg laws in India.
Right. Right.
Take on that.
I think Hitler has committed something which is unpardonable because he has given, let's say, an example which every idiot wants to use in every inconvenient situation. Okay. So they have zero understanding of the Holocaust. They have zero understanding of Nazi history. They have zero understanding of fascism. They just take the points and they keep using it wherever they want. In fact, I had a gentleman called the RSS our SS, OURSS, okay, because they apparently took out a drill and he said, see, this is our SS and therefore RSS. I said, wow, this is the only wordplay you're capable of, because beyond that you have no depth at all. Now the point is, since the allegation against the legislation is general, vague, and certainly devoid of any specifics, my response should also be general and vague, because when they deal with me in specifics, I will respond to them in specifics. Point is simple. Is the right to convert a part of fundamental right under Article 25(1)? The answer is a very clear no. There is a judgment on the point which continues to hold the field. Reverend Stanislaus versus State of Madhya Pradesh of the Supreme Court, where the anti-conversion legislations of Odisha and Madhya Pradesh were actually challenged by a Christian missionary. No surprises there. And therefore, the Supreme Court said, when you choose to treat the right to convert as a part of fundamental right to practice your religion, then you create law and order issues, and therefore a limitation on the right to convert is a legitimate and a reasonable restriction of your right to practice. Okay. In fact, the Supreme Court, I wish, had gone a step further, saying that those religions which have conversion as their cornerstone, when they enter the territory of India, must give up that cornerstone, because you're effectively affecting our rights, and therefore your right to practice your religion in this country is contingent on you giving up the right to convert under any circumstances. Otherwise, it's a lopsided game, and the same law will effectively have different consequences, where the right to convert becomes a part of fundamental right for certain religions, and those religions which don't have that particular concept, or do not at least have the concept today, are left at, they are typically at the rough end of the stick. Okay. So therefore, first response, 100% constitutional to have a legislation which specifically puts limitations on any form of fraudulent and let's say coerced conversion. So if you look at the definitions clause of this particular ordinance of 2020, they clearly identify what is coerced, what is fraudulent, so on and so forth. Therefore, firstly, this is not a blanket ban on conversion. It is a ban on pushing someone to take an uninformed decision, or pushing someone to take a decision which is not out of their own volition or free will. That is the fundamental point. And there is no jurisdiction or any, there is no, principle of constitutional law. I'm happy to be corrected here. I challenge anyone to prove me wrong here. That allows you to say that the right to convert is untrammeled. The right to convert has no restraints, and there can be no restrictions on it. Therefore, the comparison with Nuremberg laws is stupid, because it's not as if we are asking let's say the minorities in this particular country to wear a green crescent on their shoulder and walk around. Okay, so let them not insult the Jews who had to wear the yellow Star of David, and whose shops were vandalized. Anyone who does this, according to me, is indulging in tacit anti-Semitism, because you're appropriating the history of anti-Semitism to a community which has absolutely zero relations, or let's say good relations, with that particular community. Please don't do it. So in my opinion, comparison to Nuremberg laws is a typical hyperbole that the left resorts to, at least the Indian left resorts to, because they never wish to deal with the specifics of a certain question. Their strategy has always been pitch it at the most extreme level possible, so that there is no possibility of a nuanced discussion. Anybody who discusses nuance becomes boring, and whoever comes out with sensationalism is the one who's the loudest voice in the room. So therefore, since they want to be the loudest voice in the room, let me respond with an equally loud voice. You have no idea of constitutional law. If this is your position, there is no point in having a discussion with you. If according to you this translates to violation of constitutional principles, then perhaps you're subscribing to the Constitution of Pakistan, not India.
that last line is really hard hitting. But many on the left have been arguing that this law is actually anti-Hindu women. It treats Hindu women as personal property. It treats Hindu women as immature people who are unable to make their own decisions. So this is basically anti-women law. So they're no longer arguing that this is anti-Muslim. They're saying this is anti-women to give it more wider acceptability.
I see.
How do you argue against that standpoint?
They should actually take this argument to the Christian women of Kerala and to the Malabar Christian Society of Kerala, because then they will respond to them in kind, because they will say whether or not love jihad is a reality, because the Christian Society of Kerala is effectively saying that love jihad is a reality. Okay. So assume for a moment, and this is not a hypothetical, and this is certainly not out of the realm of possibility, if a Catholic Syrian or a Roman Catholic Syrian girl or any other woman from the Christian community of Kerala were to migrate to Uttar Pradesh, and that person or that woman were to be subjected to the same treatment that a Hindu woman is subjected to through the concept of, I call it grooming, not even love jihad. It is positively grooming. Love jihad trivializes it, and therefore I think it should be called grooming. And they're subjected to this kind of sexual grooming, and ultimately translates to religious conversion. Okay. Would they still call it something which is anti-Hindu women? No. The point is very simply this. If there is a conscientious conversion to a particular religion, knowing fully well what the consequences are, or if you enter into a certain relationship with the knowledge that you're ultimately going to be pushed to conversion, or you're going to be asked to convert, then I'm sorry to say that's your party or your funeral. There's nothing that anybody can do about it. But if at the outset the approach is rife with a lot of treachery, there is a lot of lies, and you're trying to mislead that person by coming with a different name and then setting a different expectation, and suddenly the tables are turned, then the state has the right to step into the picture, because this is not an attack against an individual. This is clearly a target with respect to a certain community. Therefore, when you reduce this particular issue to simply a question of individual rights, then you forget that individuals make up the community, and ultimately, slowly, what you're doing is changing ones and twos and threes and fours, and the community ultimately looks back and asks itself, what has happened to the entire community? This is what will happen. Okay. Now, the second point that I think needs to be responded to is, if you think that the legislation is about treating women as chattel or property, no, the legislation prevents women from becoming chattel or property, is my point. Okay. When they convert, we have to ask them, what is this framework and what is the treatment of women within that particular framework? I'm at least sure of one thing. Whether the Hindu framework is best or better or not, I'm not getting into that. But the framework that it prevents women from going to, our framework is certainly better when it comes to treatment of women. I'm very clear about that. I don't need to beat around the bush on that point.
Yeah, but you know, our new kind of woke liberals will say that is moral relativism. How can you judge other culture? That is fascism. I mean, this is the entire thing we are seeing in America these days. You know?
Then let them not judge Hinduism and its past. I'm happy to do so. They can't say that judgment is reserved with respect to the Hindu past, but everybody else can't be judged. That can't be the argument, no?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, that is the entire thing. So that the thing which I read for you, comparison between Munawar Farooqi and Kamlesh Tiwari, that's their standard stand. So we can't get over it. But the point is that this is something which I have also argued, Sai Deepak, in my blog, that India having anti-conversion law is the natural corollary of India being a secular state. Because India, if you make India a secular state, you're basically creating a field which is not a level playing field between the indigenous religions and the foreign religions, right? Or the Abrahamic religions. They are expansionist, monotheistic. They believe in conversion as a cornerstone.
Correct.
And let's say you have a tribe in Jharkhand which is which wants to follow its own tradition, which does not believe in this universal God, which you have to go and conquer everyone. So you have to defend their rights as well. By creating a secular state, you have put a large section of people on a weaker footing. So you have to compensate for it by bringing anti-conversion laws. But
my only point of departure with you, Abhinav, is slightly different. And in fact, I don't think we disagree. Perhaps you mean the same thing, which is, and without revealing too much of the trade secret, that is the work in progress. Whenever it comes out, we'll discuss it further. The concept of secularism as understood in Europe is Christian secularism, and the concept of secularism as understood today in India without reference to constitutional history is a form of militant anti-Hindu secularism. It's not even irreligious secularism. Therefore, I don't believe that secularism itself would have created this particular issue. We have failed to indigenize and indicize secularism within the context of our understanding. Every other country, when it uses the word secular, does so within the framework of its own civilizational moorings and background. Okay. Therefore, secularism as a concept has a very specific origin. We have chosen to secularize the origin of secularism and apply it to India. Okay. Which is where the entire problem is. Secularism has completely unsecular religious origins, and more Indians must read about it. When they do so, they'll completely understand what kind of a sham is being imposed in India in the name of secularism.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're seeing that in France, that they have a very different understanding of the secularism, and now suddenly the France is the evil guy in the worldview of the far left and the woke liberals.
Correct.
Now look at the coverage of France in the American media.
Right.
France is in new India in the sense, so. But